Hi guys, Claudia here, and today's video is about the 12th of May 1536. I'm sorry if you can hear any background noise. I do try to cut it out as best as possible. The bathroom is right next to my bedroom and Mum is washing her hair. So today we have the trial of Sir William Norris, Sir William Brereton, Sir Francis Weston and Mark Smeaton. They are being tried on a different day to Anne and George because Anne and George are higher up in the social hierarchy. You've got Anne and George at the top because they're members of the aristocracy. Then you've got Francis Weston, William Brereton and Sir Henry Norris. And then right at the bottom of that hierarchy you've got poor Mark Smeaton, the court musician. So they were taken from the Tower by barge to Westminster Hall where their trial would take place. So this is not a trial as we would recognise it today. As I've said before, this is not a fair judiciary system. So to start with, the jury are people hand-picked by the crown. They are people who owe favours to Cromwell or people who would be enemies of the Boleyn faction. Now the interesting thing about Tudor trials is that they didn't have the concept of innocent until proven guilty. For them it was the other way round. So the burden is on the accused to prove that they are innocent. Not only that, but they are only made aware of the charges against them on the day of the trial. So they can't even prepare their defence, they can simply respond to the accusations in court. Even the best speaker in the world is going to struggle with that, because as I spoke to you about before, the indictment stated diverse days before and after. So how on earth are these men meant to prove beyond reasonable doubt that they did not commit the crimes? So imagine you are told that they think you've committed adultery with the Queen and committed treason on several dates. In order to save your life, you have to prove to them that you didn't do it. But how could you go about doing that? It would be hard enough to remember the events of the specific days and dates that are thrown at you. Are you going to be able to accurately recall everything about them? Now, if you are innocent, what more can you say than that you didn't do it and that the charges are false? How can you possibly prove it? There isn't really any way. The most you can say is that I didn't do it because I would never do that. But that's not going to stand in court. And even if you could present a decent case on the spur of the moment, you're still not facing a fair jury. The jury know the indictment, they already know what the king wants out of this. It's not in their interests to go against the king. To be honest, the trial is nothing more than a performance, it's a formality. Everyone pretty much already knows that these men are dead. So Weston, Norris and Brereton all plead not guilty to the charges. I spoke to you yesterday about the confession that Mark Smeaton gave. Now, in court, he pleads guilty. He essentially throws himself on the king's mercy in the hopes that he will be spared a horrific death. Now, unfortunately, we don't have the full details of this trial because the documents were burned in a fire, but what we do know is that all four men were found guilty and they were sentenced to be hanged, drawn and quartered at Tyburn. So hanging, drawing and quartering is the punishment for high treason. At least it is for men. For the sake of decency, a woman who is convicted of high treason will be burned at the stake. So Tyburn is a historic place of execution, and it's in modern London, it would be close to Marble Arch. Over the years, 50,000 people met their deaths at Tyburn, and this ties heavily into the religious situation, because as I've spoken about in former videos, we have a situation with the Reformers and the traditional Catholics. Now, at the moment, the Catholics are in control, and it is the Reformers who are at risk, who are being burned at the stake, who are trying to fight back. But that dynamic is going to flip soon. I spoke to you about the execution of Thomas More and the execution of Bishop John Fisher. Bishop John Fisher's execution was especially sad and he was treated really badly in the lead up to his death. These are considered to be two Catholic martyrs because they died for the ideals of their faith and because they recognised the Pope and God's authority above that of the king. In the coming years, there are going to be a lot more Catholic martyrs. So the religious situation is going to become even more complicated. So this is unpleasant to talk about, but I want to talk to you about hanging, drawing and quartering and what that means, and I won't be too graphic. It is a horrific way to die, and that is because it is the consequence of being found guilty of high treason. So it's an incentive not to turn against your monarch. So first of all, you would be drawn to the place of your execution. So that means that you would be strapped to some sort of wooden panel and horses would draw you to your place of execution. Next, you would be hanged, but you would not be hanged to death. You would be cut down before you actually died. Then it gets even more barbaric because the executioner might cut off genitalia, they would disembowel the person. Only after that would they behead the person, and then they would cut them into quarters. It's one of the most horrific, barbaric deaths, and that's even for someone who is guilty of being a traitor. Remember that most historians think that these men were innocent, so imagine how that must feel. This has happened so fast, it must be such a huge and dreadful shock to go 1 week from being a successful courtier and living your life to being condemned not only to death, but to a horrible, torturous death, a public spectacle. And there's a sense of powerlessness too, because there's nothing that these men can do about that. They can't plead their case. Now, in better news, but not a lot better sadly, none of these men will be hanged, drawn and quartered. Thank goodness. They are just going to be beheaded. That is still an absolutely horrific fate for somebody who is innocent of a crime, but at least they didn't have to go through the torture element. Now, also on the 12th of May, we have the Duke of Norfolk, that is Anne and George's uncle who doesn't like them. He is appointed the Lord High Steward of England. This is because they want him to rule as Lord President over the trials of George and Anne. Now, it's hard to know why he was chosen for this. We don't know if it was because he genuinely disliked them. We don't know if it's a test from the king to see how loyal the Duke of Norfolk is, because although he doesn't like George and Anne, it's a very different matter to be the person who decides directly on their deaths. Even if the Duke of Norfolk's conscience kicks in and he does feel some sort of affection for his niece and nephew in their terrible state, there's nothing he can do for them. It's a terrible situation either way. And with the 4 other men being found guilty of treason and adultery, how can Anne and George possibly be found innocent? They are already condemned before their trials. Okay, thank you for watching. I will see you tomorrow for another video. Keep safe, and I love you loads. Okay, bye!